All right, we are live. I may have our guest co-host joining us here shortly. Let me just check on that. But in the meantime, I'm going to head through some information on what happened last time. So if you remember, I was floundering around for a good portion of time trying to get what seemed like some Linux or some bash basics running. And what I found out, if we go into our code here, is that because the container I'm using is running sh shell instead of bash, there's some slight but important differences in how it processes lists in a loop. So consequently, I ended up with this construct and it's working just fine. Also, let's see, we're on the right branch here. Let me refresh because I think there should be some changes here. I also made some changes to the regex so that we were trying to use to parse out the name of the subfolder from the actual rest of the information. So right here, this regex is, let me just grab Zoom here. This regex right here was not formally removing a trailing slash, which I'm pretty sure that the GitLab API, when it gives us the URLs of various repositories, is likely to have. So I got this one working and then just add a little bit here to say if there's anything after the git, just throw it away, because what we really want is the subfolder. We could have potentially forced the folder on the git clone, but then of course we'd have to start goofing around with whatever might be there. So the other thing that could potentially happen to us here is if you have projects that have the same name within the hierarchy, this is not going to handle that very gracefully. So eventually, if we feed this a group name and go through everything in the hierarchy, we may indeed run into a situation where we have the same name and that would cause a clash at this level. So ultimately what we would do is once we had a repository folder name, we would check if it exists. And if it does exist, we'd do something like increment it. All we really need to do is descend into that folder in order to do the sparse checkout down here. So this configuration needs to be per repository. And then we need to do the checkout. And actually, when I'm looking at this, we need to do the checkout separately from, so we'll have to just descend on that no matter what. But I'm just realizing here, I might be able to change this to global and only do it once. That would be pretty cool. Maybe an optimization for later. Okay, going to admit Tucker. Hey, Tucker. Ah, he's still getting wired up. So how you doing, Tucker?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. We're live. You know what? I changed my shirt from black to blue because the black was so bad with the white background, and this is just as bad.
Hey, I'm gonna walk downstairs so I can see it on my computer screen.
Yeah. So I was explaining to the audience that last time I spent probably the last 30 minutes smacking my head on what looked like basic shellcode syntax. And so I had to wrap it up. And when I got offline, I tried to look into why. And it is basically because this Alpine container has SH shell, or maybe it has Z shell. No, I think it just has a straight SH. So there was some key differences in using the looping construct and try to process a list and using IFS. So I had to end up with this structure where other bashisms that you could look up all day long would work fine with, parentheses and other things. And so ended up with this, and it's working. Within this code too, we're receiving a list of repositories, and we want to parse out the folder name so that once the clone is done, we know what folder to descend into, so that we descend in right here, so that we can then do this sparse checkout setup and then do a checkout. So, and Tucker, I don't know if you're as familiar, but there's an article that got published in A Cloud Guru where I had this code, and basically it uses sparse checkout, it uses partial clone, and it uses shallow clone, all of those to make sure you just get a copy of what is your code. Because if you're going to code count, say, hundreds of repos, getting years of history or a whole bunch of binaries that you're not going to count is going to cost you a lot of time and compute if you're doing this in runners. So this code was originally came from there.
Awesome.
So, I hate to say it, for bash help, you probably invited the wrong guy, but
well, I broke my head on that one after I closed up the last one, and so we got it working now. So if we actually just go in here into the pipelines, and I added the time command, it actually made it pretty messy, but I did want to see how long these clones were taking. So if we go back to the top here, we install Git because it doesn't have Git on it, and then we start cloning. And we're even pulling in www.gitlab.com, and it only takes a minute to bring it in and 9 seconds to extract it, I think. So that's pretty good because that repo is normally pretty huge. So if you're counting a lot of code, and also in here, this is kind of the plugin that people can use, once they build it from all over their install. But here's the code that actually calls it. And we are giving it right now 3 repositories separated by the pipe symbol. Also, one thing we found out, last time, 2 times ago, I was complaining about regexes and how they're not very determinative. Once you make one, it covers the scenarios that you can think up in your head or that you tested, but then there's usually like 500 other scenarios it doesn't cover. So we originally went for using base name, and base name will parse a URL, but as soon as there was characters in it like this that it didn't recognize, all of a sudden it didn't do anything to it. It just gave you the URL back straight. So we had to use a regex in order to say, I don't care what these characters are. So base name is only looking for path characters. But regex is just like, nah, dump it all except for this very last part here. So just to point out to our viewers too, that this syntax right here is a special GitLab syntax. Well, sort of. This is how you do username and password when you pass it to Git URL. But GitLab has a special GitLab token is what you make the user, which just keys it to the fact it's going to use a token that already exists in our CI job. And every CI job that launches gets a temporary token that then has permissions to go do things of the user ID that set off the GitLab CI job. So if you do a push, it's going to process it with your user ID and permissions. And this token lets you get access. I'm sorry, no, it doesn't. It lets you get access to some capabilities. So you can read repositories, you can write to repositories. So it gives you some additional capability to not have to provide personal token information, but it's somewhat limited. So we wanted to be able to support that syntax. So if someone gives a list that has it in it, it'll take it. And just show here that it is indeed working. Which one is it on? It's on this pushed to repo from another CLI. And so right here, you can see, first of all, it masks it because it knows it's a secret, and then it is able to retrieve it with those with those permissions. So at this point, we have the code processing a, let's actually just go into our IDE here. We have the code now to the point where it can process a list of repositories. So Tucker, the other thing we're thinking of doing was being able to give it a root group in GitLab and have it enumerate all the repositories in that list. Because obviously if you have a whole bunch, and so this as it is would work with any Git repository. So you can point to Git repositories that the GitLab CI job would have access to, whether that's public repositories, or maybe inside of your company, you have a runner running and you have an internal Git repository. And as long as you're inside, you're allowed to see public projects as long as you're inside your public network. So as it is now, it works with anything. The next extension, though, would be GitLab specific, which would be to say, you know, I'm on GitLab.com and I have this root group, or I'm on my own GitLab instance and I want to use this particular group. Please enumerate all repositories under that group. So we need a way to enumerate groups and projects. And Tucker, from your familiarity with GitLab, do you know if there are ways for us to do that other than go through the UI?
I'm not certain. I'm wondering what mechanism they use for the group exporter. I'm not sure how they do that. So the baked in group exporter, I'm sure they have some.
Oh yeah, I never even thought about
logic for that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what mechanism they're using though.
Right. I think they're probably using like the GitLab API. So folks should know out there that GitLab has a very rich API, but the API is both for doing Git operations as well as controlling and configuring GitLab itself. And so if I say GitLab API group, I'm just going to Google it like everybody else would. We get into the API section of our documentation. And then you just kind of have to make your way through here to understand what you can do. And so as we look through here, we can see list of groups, subgroups, list of groups, projects, list of groups, shared projects. So from this one API, in theory, we can list groups and their subgroups and their projects by calling this somehow. Now, a lot of folks write in Python, and we do have some Python libraries that you can just load up and have access to the GitLab group API. I'm kind of a shell scripting guy, so I go with primitives, and I recently discovered something interesting. So if there's other people out there who are kind of, you know, into harming themselves by using bash, they should know that there are someone who's put together a bash API library in front of GitLab. I have, to be fair to live coding, Tucker, I try not to go through this stuff ahead of time and learn too much about it, because the whole idea of live coding is kind of, you know, you're sitting, people get to see you learn it as you would learn it the first time. So
Absolutely.
Lots of opportunity for embarrassment.
Well, and I'm actually going to drop from my phone here, and I realized it was a dumb idea to use the phone because the screen is so tiny. So you should see a request for me to join the meeting.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Laptop.
Yeah, thanks.
There we go.
Now the two of you, for a moment there was two of you, and you had double the power, man. You're dual processor, Tucker. All right, so looking through here, I have no idea exactly what's in here. There's something here for groups, something for projects. Okay, display usage. Get groups config. List path, list ID, create group, edit group, delete a group. Get group path or ID. list groups, IDs, handle params. Okay, so here's some. I'm not seeing any enumerate functions. Get groups config. List group paths. Huh. So I guess we could throw this in the same container we're using. Am I in that container? Yes, I am. So right now I have, well, I'll just exit out. I'm going to start a container that's exactly the same one that we're using in the CI stuff so that when we play with things, they do the same. I want that Git repo, and I know there's no Git on here, so I'm going to do APK, which is the Alpine package installer. Get Git. No, APK install Git. I guess I need a little update here on APK even. Add, oh, that's right. Nothing like having 50 package managers. All right, so we should have Git, sweet. I want to grab this repo. And I do HTTP, so we don't have to bother with installing SSH as well. I tried to do an SSH URL with this earlier, and then it wanted SSH on here, which makes sense, but one more dependency we can skip. You know, there's no dir. Okay, so not found. Oh, I never thought about it, but some of these might not be compatible without bash too. It's weird. Okay. Declare not found. Declare not found. Line 14. Okay, so I bet you it is that we don't have bash. I wonder if we can get bash. APK command already. Okay. So now bash you. Do you work? What do you know? Oh, we're missing JQ. Dependencies, dependencies, dependencies. The internet lives and dies on dependencies, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
All right. That looks a little better. What's a private token? So we're not running. I bet you if we're running under the runner, we might well do something about that. But so far this implies we're going to need, let's see here. API. So when we were on here before, we talked about Jefferson lives in Las Vegas. Why don't you give a little intro of where you live and what you do?
Yeah, so I live out in New Mexico. I'm a federal solutions architect at GitLab, so I'm on the federal team. And in a nutshell, what I do and what I love doing at GitLab is modernizing the government's stack and how they improve upon their software development lifecycle. So pushing software like GitLab is something I'm very passionate about into the public sector and modernizing government. So that's why
Nice. I think everybody's probably keen on modern government, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go to it's called different things in different states, but DMV or VMD or whatever abbreviation is in your state for the motor vehicle, you stand in a line there once and you're like, this could be better. Things like that. Or I get to work with the national labs, so all the Department of Energy, which is pretty cool. So I'm dealing with a bunch of scientists who are all like nuclear physicists and PhDs and get to nerd out with really cool toys all the time. So I get to have some cool conversations. But I'm passionate about improving as much of the government as possible. So
nice. That's cool. All right, so we need a token here. And even though we're gonna, whatever we use, we're gonna throw it away when we're done this session. I don't want it to be something with high privileges, even during this brief time. So I think I know of a user. Do you have any test users? Let's see, I got, let me check out one test user I have on the other screen here.
Are you playing with the demo server or GitLab.com?
GitLab.com, yeah. So guided exploration. So
yeah, I don't have any on there.
Okay, I'm gonna go.
If you need to use my actual user, I guess you can too if you need.
I've got a couple really low privilege test accounts, so I'll just create one off of one of those.
I'm gonna gnaw on some toast. So I'm gonna turn off my camera.
Guys gotta eat, right? Okay, so I'm gonna add this. All right. Oh, I didn't export. Okay, so now it wants prefix is missing. I guess it might help to read the docs. Never know. Okay, so what's a private token? URL prefix. A private token, your URL prefix, your GitLab user. Okay. Okay, it's happy with our setup, it looks like. Let's see what happens if we do list path -- all. This might be a mistake. Oh. curl not found. Okay. And then one thing I try to do whenever I add a dependency is immediately go to where I am keeping my code and update the code because I will forget, and then we'll be in dependency la la land. So we added bash, but JQ I remember we added earlier, and now we had to add curl. Okay, so now what happens? Curl status 6 URL. Okay, so it's not really a user, even though it said that in the docs. It means the GitLab instance URL, it looks like. So.
And is this code counter meant to count the code in the just in master, or are you looking for activity in general in lines of code?
Yeah, so the way that I carved it out originally was, yeah, just default branch, and it is actually like throwing away all the other branches. So it would be harder, although I don't know if you need to do it. So this is mainly for tools like that charge you by amount of code scanned, the DevSecOps tools. So usually, you know, if you got an estimate of all your default branches across everything, you know you'd be at least at that level. And then if you're going to like continually scan developer branches as well. But I think in most of them, they're not doing a branch differential. So they're submitting all the code in the branch you're working on. But I'm not sure, actually. So what I wanted to do is get the most difficult case is how to add up all my code everywhere across all the repos I want to potentially use a DevSecOps tool on. So that was what I tried to solve for.
I see.
And actually, so SCC is a code counter made in Go, and it's lightning fast and fairly modern. And before this, I worked with the developer of it and asked for several features, and they actually responded. So there's like binary counting. It gives you a count of the total binary or bytes of all the files that it went over during the install. So let's do, you know what, let's do. Oops. Huh, no idea what that is. Parse error. Okay, no more error, but so here it tried to curl. Oh, maybe it's just the GitLab level because that's where our API should hang off of. I'm not getting anything. What does our help say? List path all. Well, let's do list path. Path. Okay. Getting squat, man. Doesn't seem to. So are you Python guy then, Tucker?
I can navigate Python decently well. I mostly worked with .NET Core stuff and JavaScript.
So I know that Martin Broomer has some Python that calls the GitLab API out there that will enumerate all projects in all groups. Let me just see if I can find that real quick. So what we could do then is do this in a separate container, retrieve the list, and then pass it to the next container. That would be another approach. bookmarks.
And I don't know if you found this, but there's something cool. This seems to be a missing, what you're doing seems to be a missing functionality right now, but it might be able to be paired with, there's a curl command for pulling from a project every language used and the percentage of that language in the project. So it could be like Ruby 65.
Oh yeah,
JavaScript.
clock. Yep. So I
You could
considered
map
clock.
that to your total lines, and you could even say like,
Yeah.
this is Ruby code I have, this is how much Java code.
Yeah. So we're actually using SCC is the same idea,
Okay.
except it is much newer. So here's its output for these 3 repos that are in our test bank right now.
Oh, cool.
So, but not only that, this is actually just console output. It also outputted as a JSON and as an HTML. So if we go into our artifacts, we can just click it and get, well, I'm sorry, these are my DU commands that I created to get those. But if we go into lines of code, we get the same thing in HTML, but we also get it in JSON. So if we want to programmatically deal with it further, we can. And then I wanted it to count bytes. So some of the tools are able to take your compiled binary. So for instance, a .NET assembly, which is sort of a binary, and count it or to scan it. So then they count the binary as scanned code at its size of the file. So those file types might be different than your source code file types. So in the case of .NET assemblies, it'd be .dll. So what I did here was I made it so that you can give this a list of binaries you want to add up. And then I used awk. This is the first time I've ever used awk in a significant way, but I was able to put a header and a footer on it. And so in the HTML world, that was especially important. So using awk, I was able to make a mini HTML output from the raw data. So that's what these other 2 are. So these are, if you were to say, I also want to count all the DLLs in this entire hierarchy, you get, you know, a total bytes of DLLs in the code. So yeah, SCC is kind of the same idea, but because it was written in Go, also, I didn't know if the author was going to be able to respond and help out. And we have a lot of people at GitLab that do Go because I don't know, folks may not know, but our entire runner is written in Go, and it's actually the source code's out there for folks to take and adapt to the runner to different platforms if there's a Go runtime for it. So I thought, well, if I pick the one that's Go, asking someone at GitLab to say, hey, can you update some Perl code? I didn't think I was going to get much uptake, so I went for the Go. I goed for the gold. All right, let's see here. So Martin Brummer had that repo I've cited a few times. Can't remember what it's called though. He's in Europe, so I can't ask him right at the moment. Oh, you know what? I think there's, I think one of his scripts was in guided explorations as well, so it might have what we need here. Data leakage audit report. So this one goes through an entire hierarchy. And so it gets projects, attributes, checks if it's private. So it looks like the main code we would need might just be these enumeration routines here. Top group and get projects. But I am not a Python whiz. Okay, so here we're getting check forks, check shared projects. Let's go down here to see how it's used. Get group and group object and subgroups. Okay, so let's just take a look here. We have to go to Python. It's going to take more than one session to make our way through here. Okay, so here, data leak audit. Pip requirements. Python latest. So what do we have? We're on Golang. So maybe for right now, what we'll just do is put it right in line here. Well, it's not that hard to put in the library. So I think we talked about this before, and you know this, Tucker, but by putting this dot here, this job becomes invisible, so we can use it kind of like a function. So we can create something and get groups, and then we'll follow the basics that we have on this one. So we're going to do Python image and do this script here. That means we'll need the requirements file. So let's see if I can open the web ID here. Tool around a little easier. So this is why I was hoping to do it in Bash. It's a little bit more fussing around to get set up with Python, but it's not a killer. So here's the GitLab Python library. Have you played with that at all, Tucker?
No, I haven't toyed with it at all.
Okay, we won't need to check forks, and we don't need checking for private. I'm wondering if we might only need this first part. Trouble switching tabs here. Here we go. So it's our file name here. Data leakage audit. Okay, so we'll call it list groups. Okay. So get project attributes, get projects, check, check. Checks. Okay, but I don't think we're needing the checks. So then it looks like the real McCoy starts. Okay, so command parsing, variables. And that looks like about it, right? At the end of this, we should have all of our projects, maybe. For as much as I know about Python, today's episode should be called Drunk Coding, because although I'm quite sober, I'm sure that my code will look like I was drunk. If you're a Python expert.
I was throwing around Python was, I think, like 2017, and I was dealing with like a Raspberry Pi and so it's been a while for me. So I can read it and stuff like that, but I'm a little rusty.
Yeah, I think it's funny. A lot of people I run into in automation, they're quite used to breaking their face on stuff. I remember we have 2 kids, and I remember the difference between my daughter and my son learning how to walk. And my daughter would just kind of stand up and then just start tipping her body forward and see what happens. And then eventually her leg would come out. Oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do next. So she's not a coder today, but okay. So if we go back, pardon me, I know that's loud with that mic, to our code here. This call is what should be calling our code with the token, the root group, and then I'm going to guess V is verbose or visibility. Oh, run visibility report. Okay. So go back to ours. Weird. It doesn't like to go to that second tab directly. I have to go to the first one first. Seems like. So this got to become list groups. And get token and group ID. So let's. Did I do this right? Yeah, okay, so the code's in there. So then we want to use get groups up here. So I'm not going to worry about actually feeding them anywhere. I'm just going to try to get it to output to the screen. So for those who are watching at home, we're getting a little far along here to not be actually running our code. So agile iterations, we want to run our code frequently so we find mistakes quickly. So I'm trying to actually build up the absolute minimum of this Python code that we need to just get it to run without choking. And then next get it to a mid list of groups. And then next I would try to feed that list of groups into the next stage. So that's why I'm interested in running it now. And although we could work on a container, there's so much going on here. We're going to be tapping into GitLab variables in order to get everything. It's going to be just as easy for me to submit it in CI as to hack around locally before I submit to the main event here. So get token, I'm going to say, actually, wait, am I in the wrong project? So actually we'll just change this to, what was that token we were using here? CI job token? I don't know if this is going to work. Might actually, so we'll come to this guy. And then group ID, we'll just set that. Group ID. Quotes. I think that's what I mean, even though technically group ID is an identifier, not a name. Let's see if we can tell real quick. Oh, we should be able to tell from the logs in this repo. Succeeding here. Oh, maybe because I think it just fails because it actually found findings. So where's group ID set here? Oh, we saw it in the YAML. Yeah, so it's not an ID number. So there is technically a group ID, which for guided explorations, which I'm trying to hit here. The way you find your group ID, if you actually need the numerical ID, is right here at any given GitLab group, and it's unique across the entire instance. So it's one of the ways that if you have overlapping project names, you can use the ID to be absolutely sure what you're referring to is unique. Okay, so this guy, we know then that that's okay. And then we want to do an extends. And I want to extend get groups. So should we do a double check, Tucker? Requirements file here, copied it. List groups Python, and I copied just all what appear to be the enumeration routines. And then we're going to call that, and we're using the same container. And we're also going to use the GitLab CI job token, the GitLab group ID. If everything works, there'll just simply be no errors because I haven't emitted anything yet anywhere. So I'm going to give it a run. What do you think? What odds do you give us?
Coding experience very rarely does the first run ever work.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I have faith in your abilities, but I don't know. I have faith in my own abilities, and most times when I do the first time, it fails. So
I mean, in the last decade, I could probably say like maybe 5 times I've written this much code, hit go, and it actually runs without an error. So
yeah, exactly. So
yeah. I'm going to commit straight to master because I'll tell you why. It turns out like right here, if I go onto a branch, you'd have to do a ref right here to the branch. But then this can't take a variable. Ref in an include can't take a variable. So we can't, otherwise I'd self-refer to my own branch and then it would all work. So before I'd hard-coded the branch, and now I'm just like, you know what? This isn't a production repository and I don't want to keep removing that whenever I merge to master. So I'm just going to develop on master because we can't actually variabilize the reference. And so then when it references our subroutines right here, it ends up referencing them back in master, even if we're working on a branch, which is irritating. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see what happens here. It's going to die on a YAML error, a YAML linting. Yeah. What do you know? All right. So right up here is the YAML linter. I'm going to open that on a new tab. And sometimes with includes and stuff like this, it's not easy to find where it thinks you have an error. Actually, we'll copy this whole thing because in memory, it puts them all together. And so sometimes you can't, each individual one, you don't have any errors until it's all together. Okay, it's telling me syntax is incorrect, but no line numbers or anything. Not super helpful. Okay, I'm just gonna take this out. I can't see how that would cause a problem. Anything catch your eye, Tucker? Script, image script. Oh, this is not indented. Usually when I do, I get, I think it's because for a while GitLab individual dashes meant it processed in a different bash process or something. I don't think it does anymore, but now I'm so paranoid I always do this. So this absolutely makes sure that these two run in the same process. No, it still doesn't like something. Okay, we know that this was working without this. So if we just do that.
Yep. It said jobs config should contain at least one visible job. Is that part of the error message, or is that just a generic?
Where? Ah, one visible job. Oh, so it doesn't like our includes library. That doesn't matter. Oh, you know what we could do too? Well, no, let's not bother with that. Let's just go get this one and see if there's an error in it. Go get groups, variables, extends. Good eye. I was like, it's not in the red part, therefore I can't see it. Six, three variables. I had this happen before. The quote. Gonna tell me there. Bad indentation. Oh, right there. Right?
Is extends right below that indented properly?
No, you're right. I guess it's the old, my parser. Still. I need a script. Is that really true? We're not doing it here. We're doing the same thing here. Go get groups config should be a string. Okay, let's ignore that one. It might be just thinking we have a simple file and do the one fix that you identified right here. Good eye, man. Yeah. Wait. Yeah, still complete. No, I did that wrong. Went the wrong way. So I extends is not a variable. It's a keyword, not a variable. Still doesn't like it. One, two.
That looks good.
Like it's identical to the one below it. Extends. Get groups correct. Get groups. I'm gonna do something crazy. I've been having troubles with some of this when the first line of an included file is not changed after a rename or a create. It seems like, no. Oh, maybe it's talking about the underlying code because it's merged at that point. Okay, yeah, see, wrong indentation here. So what's happening is it perceives it as this one, but the actual error is in the extends part right here. So this isn't indented at all.
Oh,
so then let's fix that the way I want it. Oops. Commito. Ooh, pending. Didn't go straight to syntax error. That's better.
There we go.
So we should get 2 jobs, though. Do we have 2? We do. Go get groups. Now notice they're processing at the same time, but we need them to process in a specific order. What are some of the ways we can do that in GitLab CI, Tucker?
What was that?
What are some of the ways these two guys are processing to get side by side, but we're going to need them to process in order? So I was wondering if you could articulate some of the ways in which we could make these jobs happen in a given order.
Well, we could probably separate the stages. I think would probably be the simplest approach, right? And then there's what is it? I did it about a month ago where you can set the order in the YAML, so you can set kind of a codependency in the same stage between two to create kind of a
Oh yeah,
a sequential. I can't
a
remember how I did it.
some sort of depends
I
functionality, right?
A TAMS. I found the TAMS version and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But those are the two ways that come to mind for me.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with you. Yeah, that you can say that a given stage depends on another one. Probably the stages, like you said, is a little more, people are going to end up having to do that anyway. It's a little more direct, and if we get more, it'll matter. So what is it? It's like stages, right? And then we just list them in the order we want. So go get groups followed by count of code. And then if we go to here, look at this. This is encouraging because it's actually trying to do something. So it's trying to authenticate. What's your guess on what this is? A bit of a trick question. My guess.
You're using your credentials, so I'm not.
I didn't actually. I took an even shorter, a cheaper, shorter cut. CI job token.
Okay.
So I think I think CI job token may not have the API scope or something like that.
Okay.
So that same token I generated earlier, I'm just going to grab that puppy. And actually what I'll do, I'm going to set it in the project attributes as a hidden variable. So actually I'll show folks the first part of this. So if you want the secrets in GitLab without leveraging any integrations is fairly rudimentary. So we're going to go down to our project here. But at least there's something that it's called masked variables, which means that they don't show up in logs. Also, if you're not don't have the right level of permissions to this group or to this project, and there's also variables at the group level, then you can't change them or see them. So there is even some security in the UI to a certain limited degree. So it was git token. And then I'm going to say protected. Protected does not make it read only. It's just has to do with something special called protected branches. So don't mistake this for being able to write protect the variable. So I'm going to mask it, and then off screen I'm going to paste in the token, and then I'll come back screen, and we have that value. So now that we have it at this level, we don't need it at oh, actually, we'll just change it back to get token, and then it'll flow through from the project settings. And since this is a public group, it should work fine. And I'm not even sure if there's a way to tell this I don't need any token at all, but for now, we'll just leave it like that. Ooh, we're at about time. little bit of time. Okay, YAML error. Only made one small change. Wait, did I make any change? Yeah, I did. Huh. Chosen stage. Oh. So I added stages up here. I didn't add stages to my actual jobs. So this is not a list of jobs. It's a list of stages. So then we need to actually explicitly.
I think the other way is rules, which I think can get a little more complicated. I copy pasted some rules for something that I needed to build an image and actually put it in our repository and then use that later for master or something like that. And I found rules to help me create a codependency between jobs, because I only wanted certain things to happen if the image build process worked perfectly.
Okay. Cool.
That was the way I figured out how to do that, though. But
nice. I know there's also special values here. So I think the minimum changes we could have made was just for this one, created stage : .pre, and then it would have run in what's called a pre-stage, and then this would run in regular stages defaults, and that might have been the minimum, but this is a more characteristically explicit structure that if someone's new, they can kind of get what's going on. Yeah, it's cool how many, you think, oh, it's just a simple YAML language, and then you get into it and it's like, there's a lot of ways to slice and dice to get what you want.
Yeah, there's a few ways to do just about anything I'm learning with YAML, so.
Yeah.
And apparently I thought I was starting to really understand it, and then one of the TAMs I worked with, he was like, yeah, and you can actually pipe most of this out into your own Python or your own language of choice, and then have that compile the YAML dynamically depending on the. I'm like, oh god, dude.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So he's like, you're creating YAML on the fly.
Yeah.
Job, and I'm like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Another level. I'll just stay in the YAML world for a little bit.
Well, you know, the other thing is, although sometimes I know we added that to the product because sometimes you have to do that so customers can do advanced functionality without us having to extend the system. At the same time, it's not technically declarative nor DevOps-ish, because when you generate code on the fly, you can't lint that at build time, you know, and it's also not in the code base. So someone has to be able to go read that other language and then kind of manually in their head obfuscate the YAML that's coming out of that other language. So although it's possible, it should be like the last resort.
I see. That's good to know. I didn't know.
Sweet.
Oh, hey.
So yeah. So somewhere there's probably a list of projects, but we're like 5 minutes over. So next time we'll pick it up, and we'll actually, let me double check. Next time may or may not be here because of Friends and Family Day. Is that next time? It is. So we may or may not be here next time. Keep an eye on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
Thanks for joining, Tucker. I appreciate it.
No worries. My pleasure. This is cool. I learned a lot too. So thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch up next time and try to get this knocked out so that you can process an entire group hierarchy of GitLab groups and count all your code. Talk later.